Welcome into Clutch Talk Sports Radio Live. Now here's your host, Kevin Gray.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Clutch Talk Sports Radio Live on the Sports Radio America Network, presented by Media MPC. Go to www.mediampc.com and download the app on your iOS and Android device and get your mobile press conference on with Media MPC. If you don't catch anything live with us, make sure you download and subscribe to our free podcast available on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you get your podcast for free. Just search the word Clutch Talk Sports Radio. We are live on a Friday, live on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/Clutch Talk Sports Radio. You can see our show streaming live currently on YouTube, and you can follow us all over social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at CT Sports Radio. My producer, Memphis, been along for the ride with me today. If you want to get in on the conversation, the phone number is 888-444-0570. That's 888-444-0570. That is the Clutch Talk Sports Radio phone line if you want to get at me today during our show. Again, good afternoon to everyone joining us live today on Clutch Talk Sports Radio Live on the Sports Radio America Network. Memphis, how are you today this afternoon, sir?
I'm good, man. What about you, man?
It's Friday, so I'm feeling good. My wife's birthday is actually tomorrow, so happy early birthday to my wife. Give her a birthday shout out.
Word, yeah.
Over the radio, because I want to stay married, so I got to do these things.
Gotta stay married, man.
Yeah. So happy birthday to her. Going to be doing some traveling this weekend, but we'll be back on Monday, so don't worry. We'll be back on Monday, ready for another Monday show where hopefully, well, not necessarily hopefully, some of the conversation will have died down around this whole thing with Jay-Z and the NFL. I don't know if you heard, Memphis, but Jay-Z and the NFL are in business together, and a certain group of individuals aren't necessarily feeling that. So let's jump into it. So Jay-Z, Roc Nation, the NFL, Roger Goodell are in business together, billionaire to organizational billionaire. Jay-Z and Roc Nation to the NFL strike a deal this week to where they are part of the Imagine Change campaign in the NFL, part of the social justice initiative that the NFL has put together. And they've decided to bring in Jay-Z to partner with this initiative going forward. Jay-Z will have creative control. Jay-Z and Roc Nation will have creative control over performers and performances at NFL events going forward, including the Super Bowl starting in Miami, of course, this year in 2020, and the Super Bowl in Miami. So justice, social justice, music, Jay-Z, Roc Nation, the NFL doing business together. But there's one issue, a major issue that a lot of folks are having with this particular deal, and it stems around the very man who brought these issues to light in the first place, in Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick, of course, celebrating the 3-year anniversary earlier this week of him kneeling during a preseason game to bring awareness to social injustice, racial inequality, that kind of thing. So when it comes to Colin Kaepernick and this entire situation with Jay-Z, when it comes to the NFL and everything that's going on, let's take a whole broad perspective look at this. Look, Eric Reed, a former teammate of Colin Kaepernick with the San Francisco 49ers and currently Colin Kaepernick's best friend, has been very critical of what the NFL has tried to do, calling the NFL's move, social justice move, and deal with Jay-Z disingenuous, quote unquote. He had a series of tweets earlier this week criticizing the NFL for trying to create a disingenuous program that continues to keep out the one guy that brought these issues to light in Colin Kaepernick. And there's been a wide range of reaction to this entire situation. Now, you have to remember, Jay-Z is a business. Look, he's not a businessman. He's a businessman. So Jay-Z is going to do exactly what he feels like he is going to need to do for the good, not only necessarily for those around him, but for what's good for his pocket. Now, look, I'm going to reserve judgment when it comes to this. Here's why. It is very easy to react one way or another depending on how you feel about this issue. On the one hand, if you're looking at it from a NFL organization still blackballing Colin Kaepernick, but going into the business of social justice with Jay-Z, and then it looked like profiting off of what Colin Kaepernick attempted to do in bringing in social injustice, racial inequality, police brutality, and those issues to the forefront, and then the NFL ultimately capitalizing on it and making money off of it because of the attention that has been brought to it. I can understand your anger and frustration, especially when Colin Kaepernick is still not in the league and does not have a job. Now, Jay-Z and Roger Goodell had a press conference at Roc Nation's offices earlier this week, and someone posed a question to Jay-Z, and I think it was Charlamagne the God that actually posed a question to him and said, look, you know, one of the criticisms of this particular deal is that Colin Kaepernick is not in the NFL. What would you say to those that feel like you are turning your back on Colin Kaepernick, especially after you supported him, after you've told others not to perform at NFL events because of your support for Colin Kaepernick? Other folks like Cardi B and Rihanna not performing for the Super Bowl, not performing for NFL events in solidarity with Colin Kaepernick. Jay-Z, what would you say to those individuals? And Jay-Z said something to the effect of, well, we're past kneeling. Now, that is a very inflammatory statement for those who feel like Colin Kaepernick's position has now been put in vain because Jay-Z has usurped the entire movement by one failed swooped contract with the NFL as far as this social justice initiative is concerned, with partnering with Roc Nation and the NFL. And I understand that, because to systematically blackball the individual who brought these issues to light and then have someone who supported said player who brought these issues to light go into business with the very organization that has been criticized for potentially and most likely blackballing that particular player out of the NFL, the optics are really, really bad. That is the big overarching picture when you initially look at this, if you're on the side of Colin Kaepernick and trying to figure out why in the world would a guy and Jay-Z put himself in this position to, one, be criticized for making a move and partnering with the NFL while still trying to be in solidarity with Colin Kaepernick, and two, did he have a true conversation with Colin Kaepernick before engaging in this particular business with Colin Kaepernick's ultimate enemy, yet, yes,
Nope.
he settled with? So Jamel Hill goes into a little bit of conversation with that with a terrific, fantastic piece in The Atlantic. I encourage you to read it. And one of the things that she talked about was that Colin Kaepernick's folks did talk to Jay-Z prior to this deal, and apparently the conversation was, quote-unquote, not a good conversation. That's a little bit of a problem. Now, we go to the flip side of this. The other side being, well, look, Kevin, if you're Jay-Z, one of the other things that Jay-Z said is that we have to move past kneeling. We have to move into, quote-unquote, actionable items with respect to how we move forward with the protest that Colin Kaepernick started, the issues that he brought to light, and how do we move forward with that? Because once you get past the protesting part, there has to be action. This is what Jay-Z is trying to talk about in his deal with the NFL. So if you're on the side of Jay-Z, you are thinking about, well, how can Jay-Z affect change from within? Because once the issue has been brought to light, then what do you do with it going forward? Jay-Z is coming from the perspective of, I'm going to try and affect change. We think he's trying to affect change from within, because sometimes you've got to get inside to go change things for the better, especially if you've been critical of those same things on the outside looking in. So the only way sometimes to make change is to go with inside and go make the change themselves. So maybe that's...
Wait a minute. What? How is Jay-Z going to do that with concerts? I mean, he's not playing football.
So this is the part where other folks come in and talk about the idea, well, wait a minute, Jay-Z. The idea that you're going to be a face for the NFL ultimately can be construed as you usurping the voice of the very players that have brought these issues to light and still continue to deal with.
Right.
I'm talking about Eric Reed. I'm talking about Kenny Stills. I'm talking about other players who have continued with this movement after Colin Kaepernick has started. And now you have a black face partnering with the supposed enemy of a Eric Reed, of a Kenny Stills, of a Colin Kaepernick. And now the question is that Jay-Z is going to have to ultimately be ready for now. When the NFL does something crazy, when they do something that is not of particularly kosher ilk to anyone who sides with Colin Kaepernick or black players or things that have to do with black people, Jay-Z is going to have to answer for that. And I don't know if Jay-Z is ready for that particular responsibility. Look, I know Jay-Z has done plenty for the black community with respect to documentaries that he has started, the Free Meek Mill movement, other things. Jay-Z has been a mogul in business, in music, but more importantly, he's been a community and national activist when it comes to helping black and brown people. That is unquestioned. There is plenty of things to obviously that have been documented about that. So the question is, and moving forward, look, a lot of folks have been really reactionary to this based on what they feel for Colin Kaepernick, based on what they feel for JC, this whole cancel culture, all this stuff, right? Let's reserve judgment, because this is the thing, for me at least. Jay-Z has earned the right to have this be seen through with respect to his deal with the NFL. He's done way too much, too many positive things for too many organizations and too many things that are of record that have been positive for black and brown people in this country for us to, particularly who are of color, cancel Jay-Z. Now, from the NFL side of things, look, the NFL cares about one color, ultimately. That is the color green. And how they continue to make that green is up to Roger Goodell. Roger Goodell capitalized on an opportunity, and he saw it. Look, I don't necessarily believe that the NFL cares that deeply about the issues of black and brown people. I think they care about how black and brown people put money in the pockets of NFL teams in all 32 cities that NFL teams reside in. That, to me, is very clear. So if there's an opportunity to marry the idea of money with a very powerful spending community, the black community is one of the most powerful spending communities in the entire world, especially obviously in this country. So the idea that Roger Goodell would capitalize on that does not fail me, I do not fail to understand that, because Roger Goodell has done one thing very well over the last 13, 14 years as commissioner of the NFL. He knows how to make money hand over fist. And the compromise that a lot of folks think Jay-Z may have made in this particular situation is effectively, and Jamel Hill talked about this in her piece also, effectively banishing Colin Kaepernick by making a deal with the NFL the way that Jay-Z made it. Again, if there is disagreement on both sides, it is completely understandable for both sides. My thing is, let's reserve judgment until we see ultimately how this moves forward, because how this moves forward is very, very interesting with respect to the parties that are involved. Roger Goodell, on the one hand, look, billionaires do a very good job, at least ones that have somewhat of a social conscience, to try and play both sides. Bomani Jones talked about some of this in his piece in The Undefeated. Billionaires are going to billionaire. Jay-Z's a billionaire. Roger Goodell runs a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar organization. He has his employers are billionaire owners. So look, there's a lot of elements that are going on, from race to class to social economic status. There's a lot of things going on here that have been brought into play by a simple striking of a pen to paper by Jay-Z and the NFL in doing this deal together. And a lot of folks have had a lot of reaction to it. My reaction to it is, look, let's step back for a second and really understand what's going on here. Jay-Z, I don't think, is trying to usurp Colin Kaepernick's movement. Is he capitalizing on it? Yes, that is very clear. He struck a deal with the NFL to make money for his business and his enterprise. That is what he did. Did the NFL capitalize on this? Yes, they did, because they're going to make money off of this and have performers and entertainers to come in and try to placate to certain sectors of fans in the NFL community. That part is clear. That should not be lost on you. If you don't understand that, then you're naive to really what's going on here. So look, business is good for both sides with respect to this. The question is, who should have talked to who prior to doing this? Should Jay-Z have called Colin Kaepernick and had a deeper conversation about this? Maybe. Why? Because Colin Kaepernick is the one that started this. Ultimately, if Jay-Z didn't necessarily have a conversation with him with respect to going into business with the NFL, then that's exactly what happened, and he may not necessarily have to be dealt with for it. only from the standpoint of Jay-Z's going to do exactly what he wants to do and how he wants to move forward with the way that the movement should move forward with the NFL. That's his business, and that's his right. And that how he chooses to handle that, that is what he's going to do and what he has done in making the deal with the NFL. But look, let's not get overly excited for those who think this is going to be some kind of inward taking over, some hostile takeover from within. The NFL is big, they're large, and they're powerful. And they know money when they see it and how to strike a deal when they know it's going to be good for business. Like Triple H says, it's what's best for business. The NFL feels like Jay-Z is what's best for business.
And Jay-Z feels like the NFL is what's best for business. But you know what's going to get lost in this whole thing? The actual message that Colin Kaepernick's talking about.
And that's the part where a lot of folks have a problem with it, is that the message ultimately could get lost here. Again, this is going to be about how the NFL players continue to respond to this. And again, once something happens crazy with the NFL, once something is taking place with the NFL, guess who's going to have to answer to it? It's going to have to be Jay-Z, because he's kind of turned himself now into this somewhat spokesperson for the NFL with respect to black and brown issues with social justice, police brutality, and racial inequality. So with that being said, Jay-Z better be ready for that responsibility. And if he is, we'll see how he handles it. If he's not, this thing could get ugly pretty quickly. But there's a lot to unpack with all of this. But the reaction has been vast, and it's been swift, and sometimes a little bit unreasonable. Mine is, look, step back, breathe for a second, understand what's going on here, and let's see how this thing moves forward, because who knows? This may work. It just depends on who it works for ultimately. And so far, we know that it's going to ultimately work for the pockets of both Jay-Z and the NFL. It's the Clutch Talk Sports Radio live show on the Sports Radio American Network, TuneIn Radio, and the TuneIn app. Coming up next, Jamal Murphy of the Undefeated is going to join us next to talk more about this partnership between Jay-Z and the NFL.